Greetings, technology enthusiasts. I am Chandrahas and I am delighted to be here with you representing CyberBrainer. Do you not believe that the technology sector is advancing at an unprecedented rate, making this an opportune moment to acquire the skills that will facilitate your progress? With CyberBrainer, we are empowering you to take control of your own future. At CyberBrainer, we do not merely impart your interests. We assert that information is power, yet it is the application of knowledge that distinguishes you. Our courses are meant to equip you with essential skills, whether you are pursuing data science, understanding artificial intelligence, or delving into cybersecurity. Let us commence the session and seize the future today. Thank you.
Let's say I want to take a worker and then maybe I want to concatenate it with our what I want is from this calculate. I want to basically get the business process right. I want to get this value for everything before that. For example, in this case, I want to get the business process is worker supervisory, right? Or probably, and the reason I'm taking this is because this is a calculate. We will not take this. We can apply the same function here. What I'll do is I'll copy this. This is our calculate. Right. You see, I can take any text field or instance field. Right. It will not allow me to take a numeric field. Now let's say I want to get everything between these two brackets. Right. In that case, I have the option, if you see, between two delimiters. I can say between two delimiters, what is my starting delimiter? My starting delimiter is this and my ending delimiter is this. Right. But in our case, what we'll do is we say before a delimiter, I want everything which is before this colon right, basically the business process. And my delimiter is global fields text. Before colon, right. And the direction is forward. What happens? Let's say this is how my text looks. I have ABC colon, DF colon, JHI and on and forth. Now what I want is I want system to evaluate from the backside. There are two ways. There are two options. When I say before the delimiter right, system could start evaluating from here the moment it encounters this delimiter. The output would be ABC. Right? I want system to evaluate in a forward direction. But then there could be other option as well. I want system to evaluate from here. And the moment it reaches this delimiter, it should get me everything from here. I have two options. When I select forward, system would evaluate things from here and then get me everything the moment it reaches a delimiter. Or I can say evaluate in a backward direction. Then system starts evaluating from here. The moment it encounters a delimiter, it will get me everything before that. Right? When I select forward, it will give me this. If I say backward, it will get me this. Right? I'm just giving an example. In our case, it doesn't matter. Right? It doesn't matter what option we select because we know that our data, it only has one column. Right? We can see that in our data. And this is my substring text. Let's go to our calc field report. edit our report. What was our calc field? This one, right? Was it this one? Not this one. I'll add it besides that calc field that we have the reference. I think this is that calc field, the original calc field. Now I can go in here. See, most of these calc fields are extremely simple. Right. Now I can go in here. What I'll do is I'll also get the details from community for you. This is a substring. There's documentation available for each of these calc fields. I'll pull that documentation for you people. Do we have any videos on calculated fields and community? I have seen one very generic there. No, I don't think. No, even in next level, I don't think there is any video available. If you see it's giving me, and this is a text, it is returning right. You may input instance. That is what we input here. Or you may input a text field. The output is always a text field, right? Because we are creating a calc field of type substrate text. Here it returns move worker supervisory. Right? Now let's say I want to. You are saying that if we have two words, we can add a space. Yes, can. We have a questionnaire in the business process. One of the questions is a text question. I have to pull like the word of the sentence. There will be a lot of spaces. How do I do that? And then other requirement was that you have to pull only one word of a full sentence. Let's say my question. Question 1 is, let's say, what is your hobby? Just as an example. I may add any random and someone would have answered A, B, C, D, F and this and blah blah blah. What is your requirement? It's actually a text question, not a drop down or single text. This is a text question. I have entered some. It's a static sentence. It's not dynamic. And I want to pull the fourth word from the sentence. Let's go back and see if we can do that. We can do that. Actually, I think we can. We see we need to know what if is there a specific pattern we want to pull. In that case, I think we have this option called fixed position. For example, let me build another calc field for you, right? Or I'll just reuse. I'll not reuse this calc field. What I'll do is, let's say I have employee's social security number. I'll just give an example. Or in this case, maybe I want to pull some XYZ text. That's why. I create in the text field. I created a calculated field questionnaire answer. But then I don't know which one to. What you'll do is you'll select fixed. Even this wouldn't work because you don't know what fixed position that exists. Right? If you know a fixed position, then you can basically pull it. But if you say you want to pull, let's say the third word, can I pull that? No, we can pull a specific position. For example, if you know that third word is starting from 10th character, then you can do that. For example, I'm saying from fixed position from this calc field. Let me get, let's say, and position. From 10th position, maybe I want to get, for example, this is very, not, let's say I want to pull from 5th position. Till the end, then I'll just say until the end of the text field. Now, what it does is it pulls everything starting from 5th position till whatever is the end, right? Or I may just want to pull, let's say, from 5th till 10th. I want to pull 10 characters. That is the only option you cannot specify. Get me third character or third word of a sentence or fourth word of a sentence. That option is not available. That we cannot with any of the available substring options. That is not available. And how do I add a cycle limit text? They want to limit the character for a text question. No, that is not possible. With questionnaire, let me show you. When you build a questionnaire, you select a question. Again, this is not relevant to reporting, but that's fine. When you create a questionnaire, or let's say within a questionnaire, you want to create a question. If you see the moment, you for anything which you want to enter a free flow text, you'll select text, right? If you see the options are, I can give date option within say, what is your joining date? The option is date a multiple choice, single select, multiple select number. What is your age? Right. And he enters a number 23 years or whatever. Upload attachments anywhere you want the user to answer. In a free flow text, the only option available is text write. What is your hobby? This is my question. Question what is your hobby? Right? There's no option to basically restrict. With a questionnaire, that option doesn't exist. You cannot restrict the number of characters. No, Workday doesn't. See Calvil. See, no, Calvil is different, right? What is the purpose of a questionnaire? You, for example, you have sent a survey to your users, right? There, when you present this question to the user now, you cannot restrict that. That user only enters 500 characters or 100 characters. That option doesn't exist. Let's say I entered a huge essay write of 1000 characters. Now, what is the purpose of Calvil? Calvil will pull this information onto a report. Now in report you can say get me only the first 100 characters, but then you cannot restrict the user from entering more than 100 characters. There are two different options. The purpose of a Calvil is to pull the information which has been entered by your user, right? There if I want, I can say only get me 100 characters or 500 characters, whatever. But then you cannot restrict your user to enter only 100 characters. Does it make sense? These are two different things. Right. When your user answers this questionnaire, there's no way you can restrict him from entering more than X characters, because Workday doesn't give that functionality. But on a report, I can pull whatever I want. It will start from starting character position 5. Suppose in fixed length is suppose you give 10, only 5 to 10, whatever is there. Right? fixed length is from 5, it will get the next 10 characters. That's what I think. Let me quickly check. I've selected 5 and get me 4. It means it will take 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 or 4 characters. I'm just checking. When you're building your substring, you need to know your data should have some pattern. If there's no pattern, this random data, then we cannot build a substring right. Because even if we build a substring, it may not have relevant output. Because, right, your output or your data should have some relevant pattern that you can build a substring. Let's quickly run this. It is getting from 5th H. My colon is 5th and then there is a space and L. Oh, it's getting me from 5th character, 4 characters till there. Right? In this case, if you see MO, V, my 5th character is basically a space and then WOR. It is getting me a space and the blue R. Right? It's getting me 4 characters, but basically what I'm saying is starting from 5th character, get me a fixed length of 4 characters. Or I could have just said, get me everything till the end. Alright, now can I build an evil expression? Right? Basically with evil expression, if you see, you can return anything you want to. Right? I can go in here. I can create a new calc field. Of type evil expression. I'll just give it some name. Let's see if there is any condition available. I'm saying if age is greater than 30, I want. What is this basically determines what your evil expression returns, right? That's what we discussed last time. Now I can come in here and say return me text. Right? And now if you see both of your calc fields are basically text, I can go in here. And say if age is greater than 30, then return this. Right? You cannot return one text and then one numeric because you have selected the field type as text. You can only return text and then the default value is saying is if age is not 30. Right? Then the return this as the default value. And once you understand what is the purpose of a calc field, you can. The underlying fundamentals do not change. Right? I'm building this with worker. You can build this with any other business object, any other data source. It doesn't matter, right? You should understand what is the functionality of a calc field. Right. Again, I'm saying this. Then let's say return. Right? This is how your calc field structure would also look, the one you would have seen. And now this is else you want, let's say this to return. Right now, if you see once again, this is what we discussed last time. If you go in here and let's take global fields. Now we know global fields can be text, numeric, anything. Right? But here it only shows you the option text. The reason is we are only returning field of type text if I change it and let's say date. Now when I go in here and go to global fields, if you see, now only date is available. Right? What value you return here or here, it depends on the field type we selected. Right? And my substring text is a field of type text. That's why I'm able to return this. Now let's use this in R. Again, this doesn't make any. The example itself may not be relevant, but it gives you an idea. Right? What is the purpose? Let's edit. One place I could have used a calc field. The other place I could have a normal Workday delivered field, for example worker name or anything. Right, Workday your calc. Any default, you can also add the mco string, right? Any default we can also add. Empty string. We can. Empty string is also a string. Right? In those scenarios, what does it mean? In. What you're saying is if the value is default, you don't want to show anything. Right? For example, let's say if employee belongs to India, you want to show the region as, let's say, Asia. If the employee belongs to, let's say, UK, you want to show the region as Europe. If the employee belongs to Australia, you don't want to show anything. Now, how do you do not show anything? By saying if the employee doesn't belong to India or UK, then the default value is empty string. Any employee who belongs to Australia is right, it will not get you. Here I'm adding my calc. Can you please show this calc field once again? I can understand. What you're saying is if the age is greater than 30, then get fixed position. If it is, these are both those calc fields I have created. Else if the age is not greater than 30, again I'm not sure what's there in this condition, I just used then return this calc. Very simple. I could have added multiple conditions. I could have said added another condition. Saying is if age is greater than 45, then get me let's say some A, B, C. If age is greater than 60, I could have added multiple conditions. Default values. Basically, when none of the conditions specified here are true, then by default return this, or in your case, return an empty string. I don't want to return anything. I just want, if you see, the reason we have to specify empty string is because default value is blank. You cannot leave it blank. Sorry, default values required field. Let's say by default, if you do not want to return anything, you cannot leave this blank. You'll have to specify something here. In that case, we can just say, if nothing is true, then simply return empty. You don't want any data to be displayed. Got it? Alright. This person is greater than 30. Right? And that's why system basically shows this KLC field, the one we created, right? The fixed position one. Let's see who is not greater. And when he's not greater than 30, if you see, it shows the first KLC field, wherein we set up to colon, right? Where he is greater than 30, it takes that fixed position wherein we set from 5th, get me 4 positions. If he is not greater than 30, it gets me that CLC field wherein we are taking before that colon. Get me everything, right? For here, because he is not greater than 30, system is getting the other KLC field, basically this one. It should get the CA worker full name right, the default. No, this is that KLC field, right? Default is basically, I named it that way. But this KLC field, right? That is the whole idea, right? Can you show like default value in this default value empty string? What Tanvir is talking. I want an empty string. Right. Let's see what happens. What I'll do is I'll leave this as is, that we can use it as a reference. I'll run this report in a separate tab once again. Say run. Empty string is a Workday delivered field, and it doesn't just the way I selected space. If you remember, what is space? It is a Workday delivered field, just shows a space. Just like colon we have been using is about the delivered field, right? It's basically a blank. The other two empty strings were calculated fields. I think they were KL's fields. This just because if the moment you look at the description, you would know this is a KLC field, right? Because they were using empty string and then some E, S or something of that sort. I knew they were KLC fields. Alright. Now wherever the age is greater than 30, if you see, it works fine for me. It gets me the same output, right? Which is basically the same as what we got here. But the moment age is less than 30, if you see for this worker earlier, what was it giving? It was giving higher. Now it basically gives me an empty string. Wherever age, what is an empty string? An empty string is an empty string. It is basically blank. It's a Workday delivered field. And it basically means an empty blank. That's it. Alright. Similarly, you want to concatenate two things. You can create again a concatenate text. These are all extremely simple TL fields. The way you use your Excel function, you want to concatenate something in two different columns, two different boxes. You use concatenate, right? Similarly, you want to add two different text strings. You will use concatenate. Right? Concatenate text. You'll basically take two text strings. Again, I'm just giving some random name. Right? You can take, for example, you want to get full name. You want to get first name. Let's assume. I know this is not a Workday delivered field. Right? The reason I know is because Workday capitalizes everything. The first character is always capital. And then the remaining characters are in lowercase. That's how I know the moment I look, I know this is a KLC field. Right? I know this is also KLC field because if you see everything is lowercase. I'll not look at them. I know they are both KLC fields. I'll directly check the third one because I know this looks in Workday format. If you see. Right? Workday always uses this format. Maybe I want first name and then I want. Right, single space. Again, this is a Workday delivered field. It would add a single space. Right? If I don't do that, it will basically join first name and last name. And then I want last name. Right? Maybe after this, I want at the rate. I'll go in here global fields. And I want, let's say, at the rate. Right. Now system would get me first name, then a space, Ravi space at the rate Smith. Right. That's how they would get me the output. If I may ask, like, what is this global field? What I understand is these fields are available throughout the tenant, like in any report. Exactly. Workday has already given global fields, for example at the rate colon, but you can also create any global calculus right. You'll have to select the business object as global. Global fields are available. No matter you build a report on worker, business object or compensation, business object or absence, business object everywhere. You may need an empty space anywhere, right? You may need an empty string anywhere. They are always available, right? You see, I have the first name, then a space at the rate McNeil. These two are global fields. I may want them in any kind of report, not just worker, right? These two are global fields. Similarly, we have a lot of numeric global fields, for example, number 10, number 9, right? These are all global fields, numbers. Now I can also do some sort of sorting. Let me again copy this report. This tenant is extremely slow. When you're dealing with reporting, probably 90% of your work you will do with advanced reports. Matrix reports and to a bit trending reports, right? That's where you'll do 90-95% of your reporting. Now what I want is I'll again remove all unnecessary data. You don't need that. Again, I've left that original report. If you search with Cloud Foundation in this tenant, you'll find all these reports, right? If you want to reference them, I don't need date of birth. I'm removing it. I don't need this. This particular report, I don't need this. These calculus are still available, right, in the other report. Let's say I don't need this. Now all I need is basically what I'm saying is whatever column is the first column that I have selected, sort based on that, right? And Workday automatically sorts my data in an ascending order. That is the default option. Let's see how it's getting me the data. I think earlier Logan McNeil was the first. Now we see Workday is automatically getting the data, sorted in an ascending order based on the first accessible column. What is the first accessible column in my report? It is worker. But then I have other sorting options as well, right? I can sort with any field. Let's say I can sort based on the total base VM. I can sort based on any fields which are available on my report, as well as any fields which are not available on my report, which are not included in my report. For example, instead of sorting based on first available column, I can go in here. And when I click here, I can go to, if you see, fields on report. My current report only has two fields, write worker and total base VM. Once again, if I select worker, it's the same thing as sort based on first accessible column. Or I could have said sort based on total base VM in an alphabetic ascending order. I can sort based on any of the fields which are available on my report. Or, as I mentioned, even if I'm not added that as a column, I can still sort. I can say sort using supervisory org of the worker. Now, when I do that, if you see, my sorting order will change even though supervisory org is not displayed on the report. For each worker, it will basically check what is this supervisory org, and based on that it will get me the worker. Let's quickly check that. Now when I run this, you see my output changes, right? Now I have a attach and a W and on and forth. How are they getting sorted? Based on the supervisory org assigned to these workers in an ascending order. I want to validate that I can include supervisory org in the report and see whether it's getting sorted as per supervisory org or not. Right, there are other options as well. What I can also do is I can group them based on the supervisory org. What I can do is I can come in here. I can add another column. And that column is again, this is Workday delivered field. And it's called group name. Again, this is available everywhere, right? This is a Workday delivered field. No matter which report you're building, if you see, this is global. Now what I've specified in my sorting is sort based on supervisory org. What I want is I want to also group them. And now when I go in here, we'll progressively have a look. I should have added the supervisory org as well. Now you see Workday has automatically added this column called group. And what is it showing in that group? It is showing basically the supervisory org. Though in the report in the columns, I did not need supervisory org. And now, if you see, it is sorting in an ascending order. I have ZO1, which is basically the smallest name in ascending order. And then it has LARO1 and TOTO2, and then starting with AAJ. Right, earlier, this is what it was giving us, A, then WB. This is how it was sorting. The reason now I have this supervisory org displayed as well is because I have added a new column called group name. And in sorting, I have set display headers. Now I don't want this. This looks fine to me, but this is not how I want to see the output. What I'll do is I'll go back. I'll again go back to sort. Right, instead of supervisory org, I'm just taking supervisory org as an example, right? Maybe I want company. I can take anything I want. I'm taking company. Again, the same thing happens. I want to enable outlining based on grouping. Now, when I select this option, let's see what happens. These are very simple, intuitive options that we can see. Right, if you see earlier under group name, it was giving me the name of the company, and then it was showing worker and the total base pay amount. Right now we have basically done grouping and also doing outlining. which means when I go in here and expand it, if you see all workers in that company, and this company only had one worker. Now this is the second company, right? And this company has two workers right now. Or I can basically, let's put a filter for GMS. Put a filter. Now it is grouping all the employees in that super, previously showing it in that company. No, even earlier it was doing the same thing, right? But then only difference is now. Basically what I've done is earlier as well. It was basically grouping based on the supervisory org. Now it's grouping based on the company earlier. Now it's basically clubbing them. And right, this option did that. Let me remove this and this will show you the difference. What I'll also do is I'll add a filter. There are lots of unnecessary companies, will not need that. What I'll do is I'll just select some GMS companies. I'll say company. Right. Remove all unnecessary companies. Global Modern Services. Let's take only GMS companies, will not take anything else. Right now I've unchecked that box and let's see how the output looks. It will look exactly the way it. The output is still the same, it's just the way that output is displayed is different. That's the only difference. We are still getting the same data. The difference is now, this is how. Under GMSAB, these are those 6 companies' employees. When I select that box, it basically collapses GMSAB. I'll have to expand it. That's the only difference. What I'll do is I'll leave this here and then open it in a different tab and then we'll see the difference. I'm not changing anything. All I'm doing is going to sort and selecting this option, enable outlining. Basically it does that outlining. Basically it clubs all information. The output is still the same. It's just that it's a different way that data is presented. Alright, you see it still shows. My first company is GMS AB Sweden. It shows. The only difference is now all workers are basically clubbed. I expand it and then it shows me those 4 workers, Kathleen and Melissa and Philip and Lisa and on and forth. This is how my data is grouped together. Right? That's the only difference that I get. For each of these workers, basically what I also want is, I want the sum of total base space. You remember, you said what is the purpose of that sum? What I want is I want. Basically, the total base space amount. And I also want, let's for each of these at the top. I want to know the count of workers, right? That I don't have to expand. Again, there's a Workday delivered field called count. I'm saying count. Now I can come in here and I can say display subtotals. There are some other options. I can include grand total. At the end, I can include a total label. This is different. Let me first run this. Also, we can use all these options for fields or from any related business object. For related, this is a separate section for sorting below. I'm not sure if we can group the data. Let me check. For related business object, you can still sort this. If you see, there's a section below. If you see now, because we selected some earlier, it was not showing some. For each of these workers, because there's a numeric field, it is basically taking all these values and showing the sum at the top. This is what that sum does. It is showing the sum at the top. And then it is also showing me the count of instances. This company has basically 5 workers, and that's what it shows me. If I come here, this company has 5 workers. Let's see. It shows 4 here. And that's because this company has 4 workers. Because we added that count field, and that is again a Workday delivered field. We don't have to do anything. It automatically counts the instance that we are grouping. Right. And right at the end, if you see, there's something called grand total as well. That's because we selected that checkbox include grand total. Right. This is a summarize option. Go ahead. I have a similar request at work where I have to group the data, but it's not like company. I created a matrix report for the questionnaire responses. And one of the questions is in the format and the responses are very dynamic. I was able to pull the responses, but then I have to group the date in a quarter format. Q3 and Q4. How do I do that? We can do that. We can do that. I'll show you. I'll show you with worker. It's also a Kelsey field, but then you can apply the same logic because we don't have any question errors and responses in this tenant. I'll show you with worker. Let's see if I can do a sublevel sort on. If you see, I can select a business object, but then it doesn't give me all those advanced options. I cannot display and summarize and all that. But then if there is any related business object, I can select that related business object. And for example, position. Let's say position is my related business object. And within position, I want to sort based on the position, effective date or whatever, right? Position name or something like that. Now I can come in here and then do a sort based on the field which is available in position. Right. Include group name in the headers. If I do that, it will show what is my group name. It is company. It will show company as a column and I can give a different name. I can say I can call it company here. Currently it shows group name, right? Instead of group name, I'm saying that column name. It currently shows as group name. It shows group name. Instead of group name, now system will show company. Right. And when I do this for each of the grouping, let me select that. Similarly, I can include total label in the subtotals. Right. If you see now, it shows that company doesn't show company here. This is coming because we selected that include group name. Let me quickly. Quickly check and then we'll go to that. Your calculate the one you asked for. I think it overrides the default name. The default name is company. I specified the same name and that's why that is displayed. Now I think company-xyz display. Let's quickly check. It's not the renaming of the column header. This is what? By default it shows company because I selected that checkbox and I can override it. Right? Give any other value if I want. It doesn't override this column header. That's not what it does. This is always displayed as group name. If you want to override it, you'll basically override it at the column level. Right? You'll basically go in here. Instead of group name, if you need something. This is where you put column header override and you'll specify company. This basically overrides what you're saying. Include group name in header. Now coming to your requirement. This was what was pending with advanced reports. I want to create a new custom report. This one. The requirement is in matrix report. That's why I'm creating a custom report. In matrix, only it is relevant. This cal field. I want to basically group employees based on, let's say, quarter. In your case, it's basically the quarter when the responses were given. Let's say I want to group employees. Let me say Cloud Foundation. I heard data. Actually, the questionnaire was submitted by managers. It was not by the worker. It doesn't matter. Again, the underlying logic would remain the same. Basically, what you want is when that questionnaire was submitted. You don't want that date, the quarter of that date. If someone submitted a questionnaire, let's say on questionnaire responses, whatever response they gave, that response should be grouped in quarter, not the business process. Again, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, right? I submitted the response on, let's say, 3rd of Jan 2022. Someone did it on, let's say, 2nd of February 22. Again, someone did it on 30th of March 22. And someone again did it on 1st of March 22. These 4 responses came in on different dates. But then they should all be grouped in quarter 1. There are some other responses, let's say which came in on April. Maybe one response came on April 2022. The same questionnaire, this person responded on April. Basically in quarter 2. That's how I want to group. That is your requirement, right? But the calculator would be different because I'm pulling data from the questionnaire answer. It's C again. That's what I'm saying. Your calc field will be built on different business objects. In your case, you'll build a calc field to get the response on the on when that response was submitted. But what calc field you'll use? That's what in our tenant there are no questionnaires and there are no responses. I cannot create a calc field to show you or pull you that data. You mentioned you have already created that calc field to get the dates. Correct? On when those responses were submitted. The questionnaire is already there and I created a matrix report. We are able to see the response. But now I want to group. What business object did you use? Questionnaire responses. A questionnaire answer. If you go there, Let me create a cal field with this, but obviously there's no data in our tenant. In this, if you see, there's something called answer date. Based on this, you'll do your grouping. This is what you'll do. You'll go to the business object, this one, because this is where you're building. What I'll do is I'll create two different calc fields. One, because we don't have data, I'll show you how you'll build with questionnaire responses. But for the purpose of our testing, I'll obviously create one. There's a calc field called format date. There's a calc field called format date. That's what we'll use for this. You'll basically say CF response. I'll also simultaneously create one more calc field. I want to basically group workers based on the quarter they were hired. Right. Exact same requirement but a different logic. Right. Or exact a different requirement but the same logic. Here, parallelly, I am also doing a grouping on worker. And again, as I mentioned, we don't have any questionnaire data. I'll say format date. Right. CF, and I'm calling it higher quarter. Right. Let's go here. And let's go in here. Now what is the date field? Right. If you see, I want to group it based on when the answer. Is it received? Let's see if there is any other field available. What I'll also do is let me check if there is anything else. There are lots of questionnaire related views actually. And how? How is this questionnaire answered? I mean, is it part of a business process or how? How do you deliver? Business process. I said I have a small question. Actually, because I'm very new in reporting, I just wanted to ask, like suppose we know which business object we will use for our report. We have those fields in that business object. How do we find the correct data source which, would you know, use that business object as primary business object? On that business object itself, you'll go to the data source and it will show you the data source. Now you know these are the only two data sources. Actually, I was trying on compensation plan assignment, business object, but I could not see which data source I should use for compensation plan assignment. If you could show that later, it's fine. Let's see. I know this might not be the relevant business object for you, but we'll come back to this. But basically, this is the idea. You take the date field that you want to group and then you come to format. And basically the format that you want is you want to group your data for each quarter, or let me in this example take year and quarter. and in my other call field. Basically, I want to group workers based on when they were hired. Again in a quarter, right? If I'm hired on 1st of Jan and someone else is hired on, let's say 30th of March, they're both hired on quarter 1. I'll come in here and again, instead of just taking, can we all unmute? Alright. I was telling you right away who's this. And there's some background noise. No, I think that's fine. Alright, what I'll do is now, I'll take this call field. This is how your matrix works, right? You're basically grouping workers based on when they were hired. If I would have simply taken hired it would have shown me one date for each hire. I don't want hired it. I want that. I built for my client a while back. I worked on a lot of questionnaire related reports. I'll check and share the relevant, the correct, the business object that I had used for it. Also open. It's gone. Cloud Foundation. As part of what BP is your questionnaire created? What is the business process? You can still hear me. What I'm asking is what? What are the business process? Business process as part of which those questionnaires are launched. Tanvi is sending a message like I think they're not able to hear. Tanvi, we can't hear you. What I do? She's saying, I'll share an example with you. In this case, we have created it on the job application business process, wherein when candidates apply for a job, they submit answers to some questionnaires, right? This is where I'm calling it higher quarter. Right? And let me just run this. If you see, it is 1900 and obviously that's not relevant data. 20 quarter 2. Let's take this one. It has some 2020 in quarter 2. Who are these 52 workers? I think you have unmuted Tanvi. Can you please unmute her? She is not able to unmute herself. I don't have the option. Ask to unmute. Can you unmute now? You can hear me now, right? If you see now, it's grouping people based on. These 50 people are grouped into 2021 quarter 2. Now, basically, if you open, let's open first worker Adam Patterson. Let's see when this worker was hired. What does the user format date in general? It allows me to format date in any manner I want. Right. I just want, let's say, instead of full date or instead of DDMYY, I want DDMMM at the rate or whatever. I can do that. Right. If you see, it's for this worker was hired on April 6, 2021, which is second quarter of 2021. And that's where he gets hired. Right. Basically, all we have done is we have taken their hire date, and instead of returning their full hire date, we are saying just take the quarter and the year, and then we are using that to group workers. Every worker. If you see any worker who was hired on 1st of Jan or 10th of Jan till 30th of March, this date field will return the same year and same quarter. And now we are basically using that to group our workers. That is something we are using as grouping parameter. That's exactly what you will do as well. You will basically take your field. In your case, you'll take whatever response date field you have. You'll create a format date and you'll say quarter or year quarter, and then you'll use that on your matrix report. I saw my tenant and actually saw that this data source was the business process transaction index and primary business object is action event. And within that, then you'll have to pull the questionnaire response. I'll show you an example with what we did. As I mentioned in our case as well, what we have is we have built it on job application business object. It doesn't matter what. Usually, this requirement comes from the business that where you want to know, it doesn't. They'll tell you this is what we need. Right? They'll tell you this is what we need. And then you'll basically have to know what business object you select. In the date field, you are saying that I should add the calculator field that I created to get the answer right. In. This is where you're grouping values based on the quarter those responses were given or taken. Right? We'll take the response. Whatever response date field is there, you'll take that field and format it into your quarter. Right? And there are all many options. I can just say year. And now the same report will group workers based on the year they were hired. Right? I can say year, quarter, or simply. Alright. Now similar to matrix reports, we have trending reports. What I'll do is I'll have to take a screenshot. I'm actually taking a screenshot, but then I would not be able to. This will help make sense of what we are doing. But then this is an advanced report that we are using. The only difference that you would do is you'll basically when candidates apply for job, they answer a number of questions. Right. On the job application business process. Similarly, in your case, whatever business process, those questionnaires are included from that business process. This is the calculate we have created. I'll quickly show you that calculate as well. We have created this calculate to get the questionnaire responses. And for these questionnaire responses, if you see, we are getting this data. We are taking what was the question, what was the questionnaire answer when that questionnaire. If you see the date that response was given, which is basically created moment. This is what we are doing. We are basically on job application business object. We are getting that questionnaire details. Makes sense. If you see, when I'm creating a calculator of type format date, I can only take a date field and format it. If I go in here and let me edit this, it will not allow me to select any other field apart from the. Right. Yes, I'm wondering how do I do it? Because the calculated field is the concatenate, and then inside that concatenated is the ESI. See, how do you want to group your data based on when those responses were given? Right. You want to group them based on what response they gave or when they gave that response. No, not when, what response they gave. What they added during the questionnaire. What is that date? They'll add the date in a question of type. Date field is it? Tell me one thing. When they give, let's say I'm giving that response, right? I'm one of those person who is responding. What questions do I get? You. The first question is the date question, which asks the manager what date did you initiate the question, corrective action or the disciplinary action. And this is when date. Why is that you're not able to pull this? This is a question of type date, right? It should in your report. It is coming as it's coming as text. The question type is of type date or it's a question of type. Then it should pull up. That's fine. I can have a look because if it's a question of type date, you should be able to pull that question. We can have a look that I can check that. If it is any requirements, then basically I'll have to sit and check your tenant and only then I can work right. Because unless I see your tenant and use your tenant and work on your tenant, it would be. I can just give you some pointers and indicators. But then, unless I see your data, it would be difficult, right? If you want, you can share some screenshots with me as to how the data looks, and some responses, you can share them with the institute and they can share with them, and then I can try working on them in my own tenant. I'll try building a scenario for that. I'll share the questions. The next report type is a trending report. Now trending report is, sorry to interrupt, I just wanted to see once, if you can show me. Suppose if the business object is suppose compensation plan assignment. Alright, how do I go? That's fine. All you have to do is some business objects may not have data sources. Any which ways. You basically go to that business object This is your business object, right? Compensation plan assignment. If there is a data source available, you will find it on the business object. This data source doesn't have any data source, right? Most probably again, this is how Workday has delivered. Most probably you'll find that you'll in that case you'll not. You cannot select this as the primary business object because in order to select the business object as the primary business object, you have to select the related data source, right? Because this business object doesn't have a data source. That means you cannot directly select it on a report. Most probably what you'll have to do is you'll have to see what are the associated business objects. And from here you should be able to pull this information. Can there be a business object without data source also? There can be. Some business objects come without. Most probably I'll pull this business object compensation plan. And from there I'll use compensation plan assignment as a related business object. If you see, this has data sources. I'll build my report using one of these data sources, which means my primary business object will be compensation plan. Now, how do I pull fields from compensation plan assignments? I know it's a related business object, right? I can go in here and see how it relates to. Oh, I have compensation plan assignments here. Here are links from the right hand side, links from compensation. This is a one-way link. That means if you are building a report on compensation plan, you cannot get data from compensation plan assignment. But vice versa. If you remember, if you are building a report on compensation plan and you want to get that data, some data from compensation plan assignment, then it should show on the left hand side. It should be like links to right. This is where is explained this once again quickly. The left section basically says these are the business objects that link into this business object. That means if you're building a report on this business object, you can pull fields from all these 16 business objects, right? But list those business objects that compensation plan links to. Now, this is how I understand it, which makes it very easy for me to basically click here. And if I look, it is basically saying if you want to get data from compensation element, which is related business object onto this business object. Which means I can pull data from compensation element onto here. If I click the other way around, let's say compensation package. It shows the other direction. Oh, I did a mistake. For now, let's take this as an example. Basically, if I'm building a report on compensation package, it means I can, for example, when I click on this link, it basically means if I'm building a report on compensation package, I can get data from compensation grade because compensation grade is related business object. And the other way around is if I click here, if you see it says, if I'm building a report on employee, can I get data from compensation package? Right. This left side basically means these are those business objects. For example, in this case, compensation grade, which can be pulled onto this business object compensation package. And the right side means these are those business objects onto which compensation package can be pulled. If you are building a report on employee, then you can pull data from compensation package business object. Right. This is how I understand it. It makes it easy. Confusing content. This is a good way to remember. Then compensation plan assignment, that this one I cannot use because it's on the right hand side. Any which is if there are no data sources available. That means that particular business object cannot be your primary business object. Right. You can still pull it onto a report through those RBOs if that relationship exists. Not in the links from. If it's linked to, then we cannot. Now trending report is 95% similar to a matrix report. There are just a couple of differences. Just like a matrix report, it allows you to group based on group by column grouping, row grouping. The same summarization options are available. Minimum, maximum count, average sum, and on and forth. Trending report, the layout is exactly similar. You can just like a matrix report, you can show charts and totals. In all those sense, a trending report is exactly similar to a matrix report. There are only a couple of differences. I select report type as trending. The first difference is I should only be working with trended data source. When I search for trended, if you see, there's only one trended workers data source. When I'm building a report of type trending, I'll use the data source as trended workers. Right. Again, this is a Workday delivered data source. Now, this data source is a bit different from all the other data sources that we have seen. For example, if I look at one of these data sources, let's go back to employee, let's go to worker business object. Because this is also workers data source, right? Let's see how are these different? Alright, let's look at the data sources on worker view. If you look at the description, all of these say that they access worker as it as their primary business object and returns one row per worker. My company has 1000 workers. This business objects will return 1000 rows, right? One row for each worker. Similarly, here this returns one row for each worker who is basically a retiree. Again, here it returns one row for each worker. However, if you look at the description of trended workers again, it accesses worker as its primary business object, which is what any worker do. Business object also does. The difference is it returns multiple rows for each worker. For each worker, this data source returns multiple rows of data. What is the purpose of this data source? If you see, as the name suggests, it shows the workers trend. Many times what we need is if I'm building a matrix report on worker business object, right? It basically shows me what is my current head count, right? It shows me the data as of current moment. But many times I not just need current data. I also need historical data to understand trends. For example, I need to understand what was my hire count. Let's say in January of last year, what was my hire count in Feb? What was my hire count in March? And what was my termination count? I want to understand that trend. How many people were hired in a given quarter? How many people were terminated? And what was my head count? This data source allows me to understand the trend. Now, how does it do that? By returning one multiple rows of data for each worker. Now, what rows of data does it return? It returns for each worker activity and snapshot data. What is activity? Activity is basically all the transactions that are happening on a worker. Let's say you hired a worker in January. Hiring is one activity, right? And then in March you terminated that worker. This data source will return two rows of activity data for this worker. One in January, wherein the worker was hired, and then in March, when the worker was terminated. But then for that worker, it will also get you a snapshot. In the month of January, what was the status of that worker? That worker was active, right? That is the snapshot of that worker as of the end of January. As of the end of February, again, this worker is active. As of the end of March, this worker is inactive. In each month, system stores the snapshot, the status of that worker, and then it also shows the activity. Right? There is a limit, and we'll see how this data is presented when we run this report. There is a limitation. It can only show you last 3 years of data, basically last 36 months. Right? Because for each worker, it is storing all their transactions, their statuses. If a given worker was hired in 2010, it will still only show you the last 3 years of data maximum. Right? When you're building a trending report, the purpose is you want to get some trend. And the most common trend is you want to know the head count, the attrition rate, the hire count, the termination count. Those are the kind of trends you can get out of trended workers. Again, this is a Workday delivered report, right? I want to get the head count of my employee. This is the first difference in trending. This is a special kind of report that Workday has delivered, and the purpose is to use this data source. If you want, you can use any other data source as well. Right? Workday would not give an error, but then this is the purpose. This is how Workday has delivered this report and this data source. We can use index also in this optimized. This data source is not indexed, or it is indexed, but then you can select optimized performance. Now the second difference. This report shows you a trend, right? Against what? Against a time period. It tells you in a given period how many employees were there, how many hires happened, how many terminations happened, how many promotions happened. If you want to know the headcount, you can use index. If you look at this report, if you see similar to a matrix report, you have the summarization options. And if you go in here, you can do count maximum minimum same as matrix report. You also have the column grouping, which is again optional, same as a matrix report. But then the difference is it doesn't have a row grouping. Now, why is that the case? Because you're building a trending report against a time period. One of the grouping parameters is always time period. You can say how you want to group your employees. I'm saying I want to group my employees for each quarter. Right. You can also group your employees for each month, but I'm selecting each quarter. You see, I want to show one of my grouping parameters is time period. Now I can show that grouping on the default option is display time period as the row grouping. Instead of row grouping, let's say I select column. Then if you see my row, grouping is the other parameter which is required. Just like a matrix report, row grouping is required and column grouping is optional. If I select time period as my row grouping, then optionally I can select column grouping. But if I'm selecting time period should be displayed on column, then I'll also have to specify row grouping. Let's take the default option. Right. Now what did I say? Account is count. If you remember, I mentioned simply counts the instances that are returned by the business object or by the data source. Here, if you see, for each worker, system will return multiple instances. For a trended workers, data source count doesn't make sense. It is not the right thing. Or the relevant summarization field. I'll show you why. I'll leave count here. What you actually need is sum. What you're needing is you want to get, let's say, the sum of hire in a given worker in a given quarter. Again, these are all Workday delivered fields. Trended workers. Let's say you want to get a sum. Determination count. Again, these are all Workday delivered fields which are all available on this. You want a sum of the ending headcount, right? How many people were hired? How many people were terminated? And what was the total headcount as of the end of that quarter? This is all I'm doing. Let's run this report. These are all again default filters, prompts that are coming from the data source itself. I'm selecting 1st of Jan 2019, today's date. And let's run this. This time I'm selecting the 1st of Jan 2019, when the series started. Does it check the business process or? Yes, it checks. It checks when that process happened. Right. Within this period. If you see, it is getting me data from 2019 first quarter and it's grouping because my row grouping was quarter. My row grouping is quarter. I did not select any column grouping. My column grouping is nothing. Now in quarter 2 of 2019, 272 workers were hired. Right? My ending headcount or the headcount as of that quarter was 594. In quarter 3, 283 workers were hired. 6 workers were terminated, which means 594 plus 283 minus 6. It would be 2t minus 6, which 277, 27, 80, 77 minus 6, which means 87. Right? I'm taking this as 600. And then if I add 283 to it, which is 883 minus 6 here, minus 6 here. This is what I'm getting, right? Does it make sense what I'm trying to achieve? Because the headcount as of the end of quarter 2 was 594. Headcount as of the end of quarter 2 was 594. 283 people were hired. 283 more people got added, which is 8077, but 6 people were terminated. These were all transactions that happened. Minus. My overall headcount is 871. This is the snapshot as of the end of quarter 3 of 2019. My headcount is 871. Now if you see what is count giving. Count is basically counting all the instances that are returned, which is basically 594 plus all the transactions that have happened. In this case, I'm just taking hire and termination on this right. But then many other transactions took place. People were promoted, people were transferred. Count simply counts all the instances that this data source has. Right? If you see these are, it counts all these snapshots for each of the workers, but then it also counts all the activities that have happened. That is why I mentioned is not relevant. It captures all activities, and for each worker there could be multiple activities, right? A given worker could have been hired in a quarter but also terminated in the same quarter. Now there are 3. Snapshot means any status, any event. Let me go back and show you the difference. When I go back in record type, for example, I have 2 options. Let me select snapshot. Only when I select snapshot and click. Now I only want to see snapshot. Now you see, it's not showing me hire count and termination count. The reason is these are all activities, right? Hire, termination. But then it is still showing me the ending headcount, which is basically the status of that worker as of the end of this period. If I go back and not select headcount but say I only want to see activity data, and now if you see, it's only showing me activity. It's not showing me the status as of the end of that quarter. The status of each worker, which is basically my headcount as of that, is the snapshot as of that period. Right, again, if you see here 210 plus 2, which is 210, it shows me 2215 because there could be some other activities as well. Maybe some people got promoted. Let's see here. That is the number of hires when I click on a 14. Right, there's one more activity on leave. It basically counts. There could be many other activities that this data source captures. It basically shows me that trend, right? If I have to achieve the same thing with a matrix report, it would be extremely difficult. This data source has been optimized to show me that activity and transaction data. Right, and that's all this data source does. If I select 2015 as an example. Now, as I mentioned, it will only show last 3 years of data, but it shows everything is 0. Because this is April, it is only showing me data from quarter 2 of 2019. Quarter 2 of 2019, 2 of 2021, 2022. That's only showing me data for the last 36 periods. Right? It doesn't from quarter 1. It shows all zeros. Right now, similar to a matrix report, I can do everything else. I can show a table, a chart if I want. I can do a column grouping. Let me quickly show that. right? If I want, I can do a column grouping, for example, let's say H-band. It can either be row or column, not both like matrix, right? No, it would be both, right? What the difference is, one grouping is always time period, right? Because on one level, either row or column, you are showing the time period, right? In this case, for example, quarter 1, quarter 2. Makes sense. On the column grouping, I can specify anything, or maybe I want to show the time period on the column. On the row grouping, I can specify each group, right? One grouping parameter is always time period because it's a trend. Trend reports, which shows any kind of data over a period of time. Right. That's why I'll just remove everything. Just show the headcount because, as I said, now you're getting the same data. The difference is now it's grouped. Select this team. Right, if you see, one grouping is always time period. The other grouping I have selected is age group. Unlike matrix, wherein I can select both row grouping and column grouping, here I can select only one of those. The other is always time period. Now, similarly, if I want, I can show a chart, a table, a graph, the same filter options. All the other options are exactly similar, just like a matrix report. I can specify drill down. Everything else is exactly similar. I can go to output and show, instead of table, both a chart and a table. Everything else is exactly similar. You've used detailed data. What does that do? We discussed this in our last class, right? If you remember basically anything that I have specified, if you look at the recording of the last class, you'll have this. That is a trending report. We'll stop here. Please do like, share and subscribe to our channel.